So I wanted to share a little sneak peek of day 2 and 3 of recording the new Indelible Grace project. We are still at Paul Eckberg's studio. Paul was part of the first Indelible Grace record and has been around for many of the projects since then. Brought in a friend, Matt Sibilia, who's played drums live with us a number of times with me and Cooper on our Hymns and Stories tour, and so he came in and played drums. Had Jeremy Casella, who people will remember from other Indelible Grace records, and then on the next day, on Thursday, we had Andy Osinga back again, had old Indelible Grace stalwart Chris Weigel. We still had Matt on drums, and then we had some various students, more recent students, do scratch vocals. And scratch vocals you kind of put down just so that the band can kind of figure out the arrangement. I had to do some of them. I won't let you hear any of those, so you can be glad about that. But we had Annalise Sherrod. She had written one of the songs that we tracked with Summerlin Powers, but Summerlin was out of town, but Annalise was able to come up and sing. Mikey Rogers, who's helped on a couple of the songs and is going to sing one, did some scratch, played some guitar. Kaylee James and Kaylee Reindl also were able to add some scratch vocals to help us. You might ask, what is tracking? Tracking is basically when you put down the basic tracks, the bass, the drums, maybe a guitar, and often that scratch vocal, and then you kind of live with that and think about what other elements you want to add. Our engineer is Evan Redwine. Evan was a Belmont RUF student way back in the day. He also mixed the last live record that we did, Bright Hope for Tomorrow, and did just a fabulous job. But he's also a great guitar player. He's a better guitar player than me, and so he's getting to add some guitar on this, especially some really cool rubber bridge guitar, which may be a sound you've heard on some modern records, but maybe didn't know what that is. But it's basically an acoustic guitar where you put rubber in between the bridge and the strings, and it makes a real muffled kind of muted sound. That's a real cool sound. So at Paul's studio, we have a room downstairs where we often would have the drums or the percussion. Andy on his electric guitar can be down there and plug in, but have the amp in another room so it doesn't bleed into the drum sounds. The keyboards on day 2 that you might have seen, we did down there. But then upstairs is a special room where we can have the acoustic guitar, and then in the control room is where we set up a mic for the scratch vocal, and then often have the bass just going direct, so it's not being mic'd. So you can have the bass in the same room with that scratch vocal when you're putting things down. There's a little interesting thing when you're, laying out the songs. We ran through them at my house a few days before recording, tried out songs with the students just to kind of see which ones worked with a group. We always do that on these Indelible Grace projects. And we also kind of got a sense for what's a good tempo. That's sort of a compromise between what feels good, the music, but also making sure, especially with these hymn records, that the words are singable at the tempo you pick. Sometimes the band wants a certain tempo, but when you try out the singing, you're like, it needs to be faster, it needs to be slower. Real judgment call, and even 1 or 2 differences in the BPM, the beats per minute, can really change the feel. So we kind of play around with that as we're working on it. And anyway, it's great to have some of these guys like Andy and Evan who make records all the time and are just so good at it. But it's also really fun to include our more recent students. And so, even in these days in the studio, we had people spanning like 25, 30 years of Belmont RUF, and that is what makes these records so special. We also did some overdubs. Overdubs are like extra parts that you add after you've put down the basic tracks. You might add another guitar part. A lot of the overdubs we did on this were extra acoustic guitars, some electric guitar that Andy did. Evan did that rubber bridge guitar as an overdub, added it to the basic tracks, and then we did this high string guitar, which is basically a 12-string guitar, but you take the highest of each of those pairs of strings, and that makes a high string, or sometimes people call it a Nashville tuning guitar. And so that's a sound, a real bright, shimmery sound that we've liked on several of these songs. Hope you enjoy that. We are going to get back to it next week. Cooper's going to come up from Nashville, our son Cooper, and I'm going to hopefully get some other drummers on this project as well. Kind of pick different songs for different drummers, kind of according to their styles. Because I just have so many people that have been involved in these projects that I'd like to get to at least be involved a little bit. So join us again. Thanks.
And Evan, man, you got me sounding like Daniel Lanois in here.
Good.